Hello and welcome to Kikao, your weekly interactive show that focuses on the big issues on Africa's agriculture. Now this week, we are looking at gene editing, that scientific technique of making specific changes to an organism's DNA. What promises does it hold for the African continent? And are there lessons that we can learn from other parts of the world? My name is Joe Ageyo, and in a short while, we'll be hearing from our panel. But first, let me set the stage for you with some views from around Africa.
Genome editing is one of the additional tools that is now coming up and showing very great promise in terms of changing the breeding landscape because of its precision and the fact that it's faster, it's also much cheaper compared to genetic modification. But more so because it cuts across, you can apply genome editing in all the life sphere sectors, in agriculture, in animal health, human health, and also in industrial purposes.
The innovation you do is you put you modified the variety the farmer is growing. If it is a new gene for resistance against a disease, put it in the variety the farmer is growing. So it is that a new product is developed, because any new product is a combination of ancient products.
The way I look at it, both in application of crops, in the livestock and so on. But for how long are we going to be withdrawn and instead of engaging scientists with these new innovations? So to my message is, government should actually come up with policies that will enable innovations to be supported.
And so the new technologies are likely to be better. They should be regulated differently. And more important, they are in the hands of the public sector more than the other ones. More science labs in Africa involved in gene editing. And if it's not over-regulated, we are likely to get the fruits of this technology faster. It's being done with African crops like banana, cassava, sorghum, and all that, many African crops by African scientists. There's better potential there to benefit even faster.
Let's now join Dr. Canisius Kanangire, the Executive Director of the AATF, with this panel as they delve deeper into this subject.
Recent advances in technologies to control crop pests and diseases in Africa have raised new prospects for improved agricultural production, food security, and farmers' incomes. Gene editing is one such technology that is poised to accelerate the development of disease-resistant crop varieties in addition to other applications in Africa. Owing to the relative novelty of the technology and its potential far-reaching implication, there is need for African countries to establish the requisite regulatory and enabling policy environment in order to tap into the promise of gene technology. On this episode of Kikao, we will examine the state of gene editing in Africa and what can be done to unlock its full potential for the benefit of the continent's population. My guests today are Professor Stephen Runo of Kenyatta University, Kenya, and Dr. Martin Lema, an expert in policy and regulations from Argentina. You know, gene editing is relatively a new technology. And when you talk of it to the ordinary people, there are many questions which surround that gene editing thing. It is a huge animal which is not known. What exactly is gene editing?
As I always say, it is a very specific alteration of DNA sequences, and you're altering these DNA sequences with a specific purpose.
So you alter the molecules in a plant or an animal so that it can have the capability to resist pests.
This happens every day. Alterations of DNA sequences happen every day. In fact, plants and animals and all living organisms must alter their sequences. But this time you're altering this sequence for a very specific purpose, and you're specifically targeting.
It is in a planned way.
Yes.
Yeah, planned and controlled way.
Specific.
Yes,
Very
okay.
good.
For instance, in the past, farmers, breeders needed to wait for specific changes or mutation to happen spontaneously or randomly. So that mutations, that beneficial mutations in plants and animals for agriculture could take years, centuries to appear, or never, because it was random. Now, with this technology, we can do the same thing that Mother Nature does. It's not a technology that does something different. It's the same thing that Mother Nature does when improving plants and animals. But now we can do it in a moment, in a very short period of time.
Now, this technology in Africa, we are saying it is new. What is the status in the world? And here in Africa, have we applied it somewhere?
It's not a new technology. Genome editing has existed since the 80s. And nowadays, there is a new way of doing it using certain technology called CRISPR that make it much affordable and easy. But as a technology, it has existed for 3 decades now. I teach at the university in my country, and I have been teaching about genome editing for 15 years. So for scientists, this is not new. And for governments, for regulators, they have been studying this technology because they knew that it was approaching the market. Regulators all over the world have been studying this technology for more than a decade. So it's not new. Perhaps now people start hearing about it because there are products close to being the market. But not at all something new or unknown for the science or for the government.
So across the world, this technology is being applied for the benefit of the populations in the area of agriculture and probably in other areas.
The advances that are more close to everyday use are those in agriculture. The improvement of mostly plants and perhaps some animals and even some microorganisms to produce better quality, more quantity, more resistant to diseases or to climate change. And that's very close to being in the global market.
This technology seems to be precise and fast to get to the result. Is it the silver bullet that Africa was waiting for to address some of the issues in the area of agriculture for the productivity and production of food, for food security in Africa?
I'll give a very specific example. A very good example that I like to give about genome editing is a very brilliant work that came out from Lena Tripathi's lab. And I like this example because they used, or what Lena did was to get rid of a virus sequence. Viruses should not be existing in bananas. And what Lena did was to remove or inactivate a virus sequence. And that's just one of the examples that I can, but there's so many other examples that I can give that can improve productivity in Africa.
We hear gene editing appear to be somehow new in terms of its application, at least, coming from the scientific environment to the practitioner in agriculture or other areas. And learning from other gene-related technologies, Africa has been has received them with a lot of skepticism. Why do you think Africa should be so doubtful about the use of this technology with all the benefits that we are talking about?
Well, I don't see why it should be doubtful. In the past, we have biotechnology crops obtained by other means, but in that case, the technology was different because there was the possibility of bringing genes from one species to the other. So that technology had much wider implications. Nevertheless, it's a technology that gene transfer technology is safe, it can be controlled, and it's going also to be very important in terms of food security. But this technology, genome editing, cannot do that. It can only do what Mother Nature does, evolution by mutation. So that there shouldn't be any reason if people really get to understand what this technology is about. Let me put you an example to perhaps have a wider context. In the 60s, there was something called the Green Revolution. In one of the main components of the Green Revolution was the breeders found genes that make certain plants dwarf, let's talk. And just by doing that, a mutation that made the plants be dwarf would allow those plants, maize, rice, to produce more. Why? Because the dwarfer plants are less prone to be broken by wind or to be broken because of the pests are eating their base. And besides, they had all the energy that they used to spend in growing now is used to fill the grains. In the 60s, breeders had to wait until that mutation to appear. It may have never appeared or be detected. Nowadays, with genome editing, we can do it immediately. So that's the kind of thing we're talking. The same kind of innovations that were so dramatically good in the past, but happened very scarcely in time, now we can have it in very short time in different crops for different purposes.
So there is no problem of safety. There is no good reason to fear. There should be rather reason to embrace it immediately. So let's take a break, and after the break, we continue with more aspect of the practicality of how we use this technology. In the previous session, Martin, you talked about how gene editing is safe and it has been applied in different parts of the world. But we know still that Africa is very reserved on those technologies. Stephen, do you have some experience from Africa and why Africa is not very receptive to something which would bring benefit?
Of all the people, Canisius, Africa should be very receptive to this technology. It is a technology that Africa, of all people, need. There is no meth-lethal necrosis in Europe. There is no striga in Europe. There's no forlamiworm in Argentina. And this technology has potential to control striga, this technology, and we have seen examples. We have made striga-resistant sorghum using genome editing. There are very good examples in this country and in my country in Kenya, where genome editing has been used with very good results on fighting maize-lethal necrosis. So Africa, of all the people, should be very receptive of this technology.
So we have some cases where this technology has started to be used.
Correct. There's very good examples in Kenya. There's very good examples in South Africa. There's very good examples in Egypt for wheat, cassava, and these are very specific problems that inflict Africa that genome editing will solve with no adverse effects.
That is extremely encouraging to hear that in Africa there are countries that have already started to apply this. So there is an understanding which is coming, but which need to be fast. You know, problems are many in terms of food insecurity, in terms of nutrition, in terms of poverty. I think we have no time to wait. What are some of the lessons we may have learned from GMO and the very long and complicated regulation system that can help us to ease the process in the adoption and use of genome editing?
For genetically modified organisms, as I was saying, they can have a gene from a different species. They can have new proteins. And those new proteins could be allergenic, but the regulators take care of checking that. But in order to check for that, there are very expensive studies to be made. The same for potential toxicity. So GMO foods that are in the market are safe because regulators have tested them. But that testing costs a lot of money that only big multinational companies can put. For genome editing, there is no new protein. So therefore, those tests are not necessary, and therefore the cost of deregulating or taking these crops to commercialization, if they are regulated correctly, then it's much lower. The menu of potential benefits for the farmer, even for the consumer, because we have been talking about disease resistance, but also many of gene-edited crops have better nutritional value. Less cyanide in cassava, less gluten in wheat for celiacs, less acrylamide in French potatoes. So foods that are safer to eat. That's also very important, and that's being developed by small biotech companies that also could flourish here in Africa. They don't need to be to have a big pocket, or even universities.
I was attending the conference on science, technology, and its application in agriculture. And one of the things they were talking about, which hinders the adoption of science and technology in agriculture in Africa, was the regulatory systems. Could you summarize the regulatory landscape in Africa for biotechnology product, like GMO? And then we will draw some lessons on what we can do for gene regulation or gene editing. But that will be another question soon, because I have curiosity to understand how we can learn still from all this. What is the landscape?
So very superficially, the landscape for genome editing is Kenya and Nigeria are leading the pack. But I should also say that Africans work in a camaraderie kind of way. So there's association with Kenya. So there's reason to believe that the blocks that we have in Africa will create harmonization for policies, I believe, that would be harmonized within individual blocks. I believe that what happened in Nigeria informed what happened in Kenya, and I have very good reasons to believe that we will pull Ethiopia from Kenya perspective to the camaraderie. And I believe that Nigeria, I mean, this is very ambitious thinking of me, but I believe Ghana is a very close candidate for regulation.
Martin, from your experience and projecting all this in the future, when still in that conference they were discussing about regulation on gene editing, they said, okay, already at the starting there is like a sort of confusion on GMO products and gene editing products. Don't you think that will make it difficult for regulation of gene editing technology and product to be consumed in Africa, because it will inherit the same complications that GMO are going through?
No, because when the issue is understood, when the regulator, the policymaker can study the issue and learn about it, they can clearly differentiate what is a GMO and a genome-edited product. And then, importantly, the policymaker, the government, the regulators must speak to society and say, look, we have this other technology now in our table. It's like this technology is like this, and therefore we are regulating it like that. And it's different from this other technology that is being regulated differently. We in Argentina did that. The government not only worked on having a functional regulation, also started to speak with the public. The regulator and the Minister of Science would speak alternatively and say, this is genome editing, this is what we are using it for. Argentine scientists, Argentine companies are developing products for agriculture, also for health. And then the regulator said, we are going to control it like this and that. And when things are clearly explained to the public understands. And also they sympathize with the developments when they have a national origin.
Mm-hmm. I see here two major things. You talked about understanding. It means the flow of information to different stakeholders. And you talked about when the public understands. So actually, you really develop a campaign to get the information to everyone, because if you are not a developer, you are a user, a farmer. If you are not a farmer or a developer, you are a consumer, and you have a connection with this. So the public need to be aware of this. What are the key things that we need to pay attention to as we bring genome editing to our countries in Africa?
Don't say that this is the technology that you need. And then secondly, also, don't oversell the technology. Don't say that this will solve all your agricultural problems. I think it's very important to be honest and communicate very effectively and involve everybody at the inception. So what we have done is to have a very good communication strategy and just have communication living from one center and very moderated, because I think one of the mistakes we did earlier for genetic modification was to chest thump and to not communicate effectively.
So communication, and get the information.
And very effective communication, and also, listening to people. You'll be surprised, Canisius, farmers too have a story, and if you sit down with them, I keep referring to Mama Winja because this is a lady in Ahero that I go to visit every time I go to do my field trials. She has a story. She tells me a long time ago we didn't have striga, so why did it come here and why is it there, and when I do this, so I mean we have that conversation. She's quite elderly now, but I think it's very good to respect farmers. I think it's very good to not just thump. I think it's very important to tell them what you're bringing to them and work with them every step of the way.
Martin, I'm always very interested by the trajectory that Argentina took in GMO already, and now you have been teaching genome editing for the last 15 years. You are in, and it is being applied. Can you share just an overview of how far you are in applying this technology at the grassroots level, and what are the success factors that made it possible in Argentina when we are struggling with all those controversies, those skepticism? The world works the same way. Why you are faster and we are still very much struggling?
Well, when Argentina began with the regulation of biotech crops in the early 90s, our leaders, our politicians, and our regulators, they didn't just repeat what somebody else was saying in Europe or in another continent or in North America. They analyzed the issue by themselves. They analyzed the potential benefits for the agriculture, the safety of the technology. They did their own assessment. Of course, they hear what other countries were saying, but they did their own assessment. They didn't just rely blindly on whatever other country was doing. And because Argentina chose to do their own, to take their own assessment and their own decisions, we decided to adopt these technologies, beginning with the biotech crops, genetically modified crops first, and then when genome editing appeared, it appeared a long time ago, but I mean in terms of potential use, in commercial use, about 10 years ago, Argentina didn't wait for Europe or United States or some other country to do something and then do the same or repeat like a parrot. We decided to analyze the issue by ourselves. Argentina was the first country in the world that developed a way of discriminating which genome editing technologies can be considered the same as a natural mutation and be registered as any new variety, any conventional new variety. We were the first one in the year 2015. And from there, many other countries in our region are doing the same as Argentina, and spontaneously or looking at our example, other countries in the world are doing that too. That's the important thing.
Very good.
For ourselves.
Gene editing is not new. Gene editing is being applied. People are reaping the benefits from it in other continents. Africa has just started to regulate on it and developing those technologies. Let's take a break. And when we come, let's look at the capacity that we have or what we need to develop so that we harness all the full potential of that technology. Welcome back to Kikao Show. Do we have in Africa the capacity to develop this technology and bring them to our farmers? Do we have a mechanism to borrow a leaf from Argentina through different collaborations? Do we have a plan to create a critical mass of people who understand this and who can work on different crops to develop the products that will go to the farmers? A mouthful.
And really excellent questions, Canisius, really excellent questions. So firstly, on capacity, in my small lab at Kenyatta University, we can create genome-edited sorghum within 3 months, no problem. All we need is a tissue culture lab. And with that said, we also need the capacity developed from the government. And taking from what Martin said, and I think more importantly, look back at the Green Revolution. What we call the Green Revolution today was supported a lot by the government. In fact, what started was scientists in Asia developed local solutions. I mean, solutions to solve local problems. Yeah. And then the government said, hey, this is one of us, why not invest? And the governments in Asia put in a lot of money to support those scientists. They said, one of our own have done this. And I think what we need to do is to have that support from the government. And I think what we need to, or what our governments need to do is to emulate that example from Asia and from Argentina, saying that we have one of our own, creating solutions for local problems.
We have an experience that when a research is developed in a lab like Stephen's lab here or yours, landing in the hands of the farmers, there is quite a number of steps. And once you have created the willingness of the farmer to change, to adopt the technology and use it, then the quantity, the quality of the product so that they can be able to apply them is quite difficult. It is another mountain to climb. So, and it needs public investment. I mean, it means private investment so that it can flow and be sustained, whereas research, for example, could be supported more by public. I want to hear from you, Martin, the experience of how the private sector came in and invested money, how the trust came in, because when we talk of this, it becomes, we go to the chicken and the egg cycle. The private sector show me that it can work. And you say, I need money to show you that it can work. And then we remain in that. How did you break that vicious cycle?
Well, for previous biotechnology crops, there was a lot of money needed for the regulatory phase. And that scared away private investors in countries like Argentina or any other developing country. And the governments didn't have enough money to fund, not the research part, but the deregulation part. Now with genome editing, again, this technology doesn't have the same implications in terms of risk. It's much safer, and therefore it can be assessed very quickly with very little investment. So right after we issued this regulation, we started to see that startup companies were created. For instance, there is one called Bioheuris in Argentina that is, this company works solely on genome editing of crops, and it does exist only because we have this regulation. If not, it didn't exist. And it is editing soybean, cotton, and also sorghum. So there could be a collaboration with Dr. Runo's laboratory in the future. And that company didn't ask for the government for money. The investors came instead of investing in, I don't know, in bitcoins. Instead of investing in some other thing, they put this money on this because they have the amount of money is not that much, and they have a certainty that the product will reach the market and they will have a return. Even foreign companies are coming to Argentina not to sell the products, to get installed and develop things in Argentina. So they are becoming Argentine companies. They come to invest just because of our good regulation for this.
That addresses a number of things. Now, we are talking of key stakeholders like the political buy-in, the political will to support this. The policymakers are to create that environment, that enabling environment that will allow the private sector to come in. We have a category of stakeholders that I think would very quickly accelerate all these efforts that we are doing. The youth, how do we engage those different segments of our stakeholders? How do we engage political people? Political people. How do we engage policymakers and regulators together? How do we engage the youth so that this genome editing effort can get momentum in Africa?
Canisius, I think you just talked about a very well-structured communication strategy. So the specific messages you pass to the youth. The youth would like to treat genome editing. I just edited or I just planted a genome-edited product, or I'm working with genome editing. And then the politicians, you need champions that understand the technology, that would be able to influence programmatic changes. And then, and I think my favorite stakeholders are the women. The women, because not only because they are very receptive to technology, but also because they are very good implementers of technology. And I have worked with them, and I'm sorry, I'm biased towards women in agriculture because they are very good technology advocates. And agriculture, I mean, there's very good documentation of women as very good supporters of technology. And you just need to have a very different and structured communication strategy for all of them.
The lenders also will say the same. Huh? When they work with women, they get return easily, it seems. Men...
I trust my money with women more.
That is very good. How did you develop the communication thing around all this?
Well, first of all, the government called journalists and people specialized in explaining both agricultural topics and science topics. And they share about the scientific developments and the new regulation. Then the government organized workshops for the general public, including video broadcasting, so people would look at it over the internet or be present, and people could react to that. So we could have the reactions from the very ordinary public, not someone that is a specialized person. We got the feedback, And then we had an iteration. We updated our regulation on genome editing, and then we communicated and got feedback, and we underwent a second update of our regulations, always taking into account the feedback from the stakeholders and the general public.
Participatory process. Where do you see genome editing in the next 10 years in Africa, Stephen?
No, I think in 10 years, Africa will be, I think right now or in other technologies, Africa is behind. But I have no doubt in my mind that Africa will be very significant and very significantly involved in genome editing. I believe that there will be real solutions coming from this continent.
Thank you very much. From the discussion with Martin and Stephen, genome editing has a lot of promise and potential to address most of the challenges we have in agriculture. Of course, it is not the silver bullet. Genome editing alone will not solve all the issues, but it will contribute significantly to this. The other parts of the world have already started, and farmers are benefiting for it. We need to bring those benefits to our people. Genome editing is safe, and it is precise, and it can be fast. The secret that Martin has shared with us from Argentina is that it was homegrown to address local problems, and that was very easy to have a buy-in from different quarters of the stakeholders. We need to strengthen that capacity. We need to communicate strategically so that we can have politicians, we can have policymakers, we can have the farmers, we can have scientists and others to be part of this, I will call it revolution. I think it is very important. But one of the things that came every time, in addition to the communication and strategy, is to start it with locally identified problems and then go with it. Because when you are addressing the issue at the common mwananchi, as we say in Kenya, then it becomes part of the whole system. So let's work together to create that environment that is needed, to get the private sector and other partners to work together for the change that we need, with this area being one of the tools to transform agriculture in Africa.
Let's now look at our science terminology for the week on Science Speak. The word for this week is genome. Genome is a complete set of genetic material or DNA in an organism. The genome contains all the information needed for that organism, such as a human being or even a plant, to develop and grow. So yes, the technology is here, the experts are here, and yes, there are also lessons to learn from different parts of the world. What's left now is for Africa to take action. Until next week, my name is Joe Agayo. Thanks for watching Kikao.